My name is Clara Vance, and I'm 34 years old. I built a business from an idea, a little seed money from a rescinded college tuition, and a stubborn refusal to fail. That business, an e-commerce platform called Try Before, was recently valued at over $22 million. I have no college degree, no formal credentials, just the calluses on my hands from years of hard work and the lines around my eyes from staring at screens until dawn. Yet, despite supporting my family financially for years, my father still called me a lowlife and kicked me out of their lives. Funny how success doesn't always buy respect, especially from the people you most want it from. Today, I'm watching the gentle roll of the Gulf of Mexico from the deck of my home in Florida, a place I chose for its perpetual sunshine and its distance from the gray winters of my past. I am finally at peace with the choices that led me here. The journey was not an easy one, paved with more tears than I care to count, but it was worth every single one. It taught me that sometimes the family you are born into is the lesson, and the family you create is the reward. Losing them, in a way, set me free. I grew up in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, a city built on the bedrock of practicality and traditional values. In our world, the path to a good life was clearly marked: get good grades, attend a respectable university, and secure a stable, credentialed career. My father, Arthur Vance, was the embodiment of this ethos. He worked as an accountant at the same local firm for 30 years, and his CPA license hung framed in his home office, a testament to what he believed was the only true measure of professional achievement. Education, he'd often say, his voice resonating with unshakable conviction, is the one thing no one can ever take from you. My mother, Susan, a high school English teacher, echoed his reverence for academia. Their shared dream was to raise children who would become doctors, lawyers, or engineers, professions with clear, respectable titles. From a young age, I sensed my own currents ran in a different direction. While they envisioned a daughter in a lab coat or a courtroom, I was in the schoolyard, weaving and selling intricate friendship bracelets, my first foray into understanding supply, demand, and profit margins. By 12, my summers were dedicated to the most sophisticated lemonade stand in our neighborhood. I experimented with raspberry and mint infusions, offered a premium ice-cold guarantee, and learned that people would happily pay more for a superior product and a friendly experience. My mother would watch from the porch, a bemused smile on her face. "It's a cute little hobby, Clara," she'd say, "but these projects won't pay the bills when you're grown." High school only amplified the quiet tension between their expectations and my passions. While I was busy silkscreening custom designs onto phone cases and selling them to classmates, making enough money to buy my first car, a used but reliable Toyota, outright, my parents were focused on my SAT prep courses and college application essays. I managed to maintain grades just good enough to secure a spot at the state university, but my heart was never in the textbooks. It was in the thrill of creation, the satisfaction of a sale, the connection with a happy customer. "Just get your degree first, honey," my father would insist whenever I tentatively shared a new business idea. "Then you can play at being an entrepreneur if you still want to." To keep the peace, I enrolled at State University as a business major. The irony was not lost on me. I sat in lecture halls learning theoretical business principles from professors who'd never run a company, all while I was itching to be out in the world, building one. To help with tuition and living expenses, I took a part-time job at a local boutique selling women's clothing and accessories. And that's where my life changed. Day after day, I listened to women lament the frustrations of online shopping. I heard the same story repeatedly: the dress that looked perfect on the size 2 model but was a disaster on their own body, the disappointment of receiving an item that bore little resemblance to its glossy online photo. A pattern emerged, and with it, an idea began to spark. It came to me one afternoon while restocking shelves, a concept so clear and powerful it felt like a jolt of electricity. What if there was a platform where real women, with all their beautiful and varied body types, could see how clothes actually looked on someone their own shape and size before they bought them. The idea became an obsession. I spent every spare moment after work and between classes sketching out wireframes, researching e-commerce platforms, and drafting a business plan. My college coursework, which had once felt merely uninspiring, now seemed like an anchor holding me back. My grades began to slip as my passion project consumed my thoughts and my time. Halfway through my junior year, I knew I couldn't continue living a divided life. I sat my parents down at the familiar oak table in our kitchen, the same table where I'd done my homework for years. With my heart pounding, I told them I was dropping out of college to pursue my business idea full-time. The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. My father stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief. "Absolutely not," he said finally, his voice dangerously calm. "No daughter of mine is going to throw away her future for some internet fantasy." My mother's eyes filled with tears, her hands twisting a napkin in her lap. "Clara, please," she whispered. "Don't do this. You're so close to finishing your degree. Don't ruin your life." But my mind was made up. I knew, with a certainty I'd never felt about anything before, that this was my path. The next day, I officially withdrew from my classes. I took the tuition refund check, a modest sum, but a fortune to me, and it became the seed money for what would eventually become Try Before. The fallout with my family was immediate and brutal. My parents barely spoke to me for weeks. When they did, their words were laced with disappointment and pleas for me to come to my senses. I moved out of their house and into a cramped studio apartment that was more office than living space. The room was so small that I had to fold up my futon each morning to make room for the desk where I spent the next 18 hours of my day. Those early days were a blur of instant ramen, free online coding tutorials, and a relentless, burning determination. I built the first version of the website myself, teaching myself HTML and CSS through sheer force of will. I persuaded local boutiques to let me photograph their inventory on volunteer models, friends and friends of all different sizes, in exchange for free promotion on the site. Each night, I'd fall asleep to the glow of my laptop screen, my body exhausted, but my spirit soaring. 3 months after I dropped out, the site went live. The first sale came 2 days later. I remember staring at the order notification, my eyes welling with tears. It was real. Then came another sale, and then 10 more in a single day. By the 6-month mark, we were processing over 50 orders daily. I hired my first part-time employee, a wonderfully talented photographer named Leah who saw the vision and believed in it as fiercely as I did. At the 1-year anniversary of launching, I invited my parents to the small, second-floor office space I'd just leased. I hoped that seeing a physical manifestation of my work, the desks, the computers, the racks of clothing, might help them understand. "It's nice," my mother offered hesitantly, her eyes scanning the modest room as if searching for something to approve of. My father nodded stiffly. "What are your net profits?" he asked, ever the accountant. I showed him the books. We were profitable, a small miracle for a startup so young. He just grunted. "Let's hope it lasts," he said. "It's not too late to go back and finish your degree, you know." That night, I cried myself to sleep, not from sadness, but from a deep, aching frustration. I was building something meaningful, something that was helping women feel more confident and seen, and it still wasn't enough. But as the sun rose the next morning, I dried my tears and got back to work. I realized then that I couldn't build my business on a foundation of their approval. If I couldn't earn their respect, I would at least earn my own. I had no idea then how much success I would achieve, or how that success would only serve to deepen the chasm between us, turning the daughter they saw as a disappointment into the financial bedrock of their lives. The transition from a one-woman operation into a real company happened in a series of small, incremental steps that, when viewed in retrospect, formed a steep and steady climb. One day I was alone in my studio apartment. The next, it felt like I had 5 employees squeezed into our first tiny office, the hum of their computers a constant symphony of progress. The concept behind Try Before struck a chord. Women were tired of the guessing game of online shopping, and our platform offered a simple, elegant solution. We weren't just selling clothes, we were selling confidence. Our most unique feature was our commitment to real bodies. We eschewed professional models entirely, instead featuring our own customers, who received store credit for modeling new arrivals. It created a powerful community and an authentic shopping experience that legacy retailers couldn't replicate. 18 months in, we hit a critical juncture. Our web traffic was surging, causing our servers to crash almost daily. We needed a significant capital injection to scale our technology and infrastructure. I pitched to 67 venture capitalists. Most were men who listened politely before suggesting I find a technical co-founder, which I quickly learned was coded language for a man who understands computers. Finally, on my 68th pitch, I found a champion in Beatrice Thorne, a formidable angel investor who had built and sold 2 successful tech companies of her own. "You've created something I wish had existed when I was in my 20s, she told me after I'd nervously walked her through my presentation. "And you've done it with discipline and fiscal responsibility. That's a rare combination." She invested $500,000 for a 15% stake in the company, valuing Try Before at just over $3 million. The number felt abstract, unreal. I celebrated that night by going to a real grocery store and filling a cart with fresh produce, a luxury after years of instant noodles. I also, finally, started paying myself a modest salary. With Beatrice's capital and mentorship, we rebuilt the platform from the ground up. We hired a team of talented engineers who implemented features our users had been begging for: a virtual try-on tool using augmented reality, a sophisticated algorithm for size comparisons across different brands, and a community forum where women could share styling tips and product reviews. Our team grew to 20 people, and we moved into a proper office with glass-walled conference rooms and a fully stocked kitchen. The press began to notice. First, a feature in the Cedar Rapids Business Journal, then mentions in national fashion blogs. The turning point came when Fast Company ran a profile on me as part of a series on female founders disrupting e-commerce. Each media hit sent a tidal wave of new users to our site. By our 3rd year, we had crossed the $1 million mark in annual revenue. I bought a small, 2-bedroom condo in a quiet neighborhood. It was modest, but it was mine. I sent my parents a check to help them with a new roof they'd been putting off. They cashed it, but when I asked my mom about it on the phone, she simply said, "Thank you, that was helpful," before changing the subject. At family gatherings, my father still introduced me as my daughter, Clara. She didn't finish college. It was never my daughter, the CEO, or my daughter who runs a successful company. My mother would skillfully redirect conversations toward my cousin's more traditional achievements. "We're so proud of Lauren," she'd announce at my grandmother's birthday dinner. "She just made law review at Georgetown." Her eyes would sweep across the room, carefully avoiding mine. The deepest cut came during that same dinner. My aunt, having seen the Fast Company article, asked me about the business. Before I could form a response, my father jumped in. "Oh, Clara just got lucky with that internet thing," he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Good timing, you know. Right place, right time. Like those people who bought Bitcoin for $1. I sat there, the fork frozen halfway to my mouth, the air punched from my lungs. All the sleepless nights, the rejected pitches, the painstaking process of learning to code, of building a team, of creating a brand from scratch, all of it reduced to a lucky lottery ticket. That night, I went home and wrote a message on a sticky note with a black Sharpie. I stuck it to my bathroom mirror where I would see it every morning. "Your worth is not determined by their recognition." By year 5, Try Before employed over 100 people. We had expanded internationally, with dedicated sites serving customers in Canada, the UK, and Australia. Our annual revenue had climbed to $8 million, with healthy profit margins that were the envy of the tech world. The accolades poured in. I was named to Forbes' 30 Under 30 list for retail and e-commerce. We won a Webby Award for Best Shopping Experience. CNBC flew a crew to Cedar Rapids to feature me in a segment on self-made entrepreneurs. I dutifully sent my parents links to every article, every award, every TV appearance. Their responses, when they came at all, were brief and lukewarm. A one-word congratulations text from my mom. Silence from my dad. At my 10-year high school reunion, former classmates who had once pitied the girl who dropped out of college now approached me with a mixture of awe and curiosity. My old economics teacher pulled me aside and asked if I would be willing to speak to his class about building a business. In the eyes of my hometown, I had become a success story. Everyone seemed to see what I had built. Everyone, that is, except the two people whose approval I had once craved more than anything. By the 6-year mark, a new round of funding valued Try Before at $15 million. We moved into a stunning new headquarters in a renovated warehouse in downtown Cedar Rapids, the kind of place with exposed brick, soaring ceilings, and an open-plan layout that I had once only dreamed of. I bought a beautiful house in a lakeside community, just a 20-minute drive from my parents' home, thinking, naively, that physical proximity might somehow bridge the vast emotional distance between us. It didn't. During his one and only visit, my father gestured around my sun-drenched living room with its panoramic view of the water and remarked, "Must be nice to afford all this without student loans." The comment was a tiny, sharp jab, but by then, I had grown a thick skin. What I hadn't prepared for, however, was how quickly my role in the family would shift from disappointment to financial lifeline, and how little that transformation would change the way they truly saw me. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a quarterly strategy meeting, mapping out our expansion into menswear, when my assistant quietly entered the conference room and handed me a note. "Your mother on the phone. Urgent." Mom never called during work hours. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. "Dad's been let go," she said, her voice strained and thin, devoid of its usual prelude of pleasantries. "Budget cuts. The firm was acquired." After 30 years of loyal service, my father, at 58 years old, was unceremoniously unemployed. His entire professional identity, built on a foundation of stability and loyalty to a single company, had vanished overnight. "What can I do?" I asked, my own concerns instantly dissolving in the face of her panic. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, a silence thick with the warring factions of pride and desperation. "We'll be all right," she said finally, her voice unconvincing. "I just thought you should know." But they weren't all right. Within 2 months, their emergency savings had been depleted. My father, a man from a generation that equated work with worth, spiraled into a quiet depression. He struggled to find new employment. He was overqualified for junior positions and deemed too old or too specialized for senior roles in a rapidly changing industry. Around the same time, my mother began experiencing debilitating migraines. A series of tests revealed a neurological condition that required expensive, specialized treatments, only a fraction of which were covered by their dwindling insurance. I didn't wait for them to ask for help. I stepped in. First, I paid off the remaining $16,700 on their mortgage, freeing up a significant chunk of their monthly budget. I set up a direct payment plan for my mother's medical bills and arranged for her to see a top specialist in Chicago, covering all travel and treatment costs. When their 12-year-old sedan finally gave out, I had a new, reliable SUV delivered to their driveway. "We can't accept this, Clara," my father said, his posture stiff with pride when I visited. "You can and you will," I replied gently. "Consider it a return on your investment in raising me." He took the keys without another word. What began as a crisis intervention soon became a system of regular financial support. I established a monthly automatic transfer to their bank account to cover their utilities, groceries, and insurance premiums. When their kitchen appliances started failing, I paid for a full renovation. When the roof began to leak, I had it replaced. During this same period, my younger brother, Daniel, was accepted into a prestigious and costly private engineering program. Without a second thought, I covered his tuition, room, and board. When my sister, Anna, got engaged, I wrote a check that allowed her to have the beautiful wedding our parents could no longer dream of affording. The money flowed in one direction, from the success of my internet fantasy to the needs of my family. The acknowledgement, however, never followed. "The business must be doing well," my mother would remark coolly when depositing one of my checks, as if the funds materialized out of thin air rather than from my relentless work. At family dinners, which I invariably paid for, my father would sometimes say grace and thank God for his provision, seemingly oblivious to the fact that, in this particular ecosystem, I was the instrument of that provision. At a holiday gathering, I overheard him explaining my generosity to a curious relative. "It's just a temporary thing, until I get back on my feet," he said in a low voice. "Clara's doing fine for now with her little internet shop." Internet shop. A company with a $15 million valuation and over 100 employees, reduced to the status of a quaint hobby. My sister, Anna, saw the flicker of pain in my eyes and squeezed my hand under the table. "They just don't get it, Clara," she whispered. "But I do. What you've built is incredible." Her quiet validation was a small raft in a sea of dismissal. As Try Before continued its upward trajectory, so did my family's reliance on my income. My father eventually found some part-time consulting work, but it was sporadic and paid a pittance compared to his former salary. My mother's health issues prevented her from returning to teaching. I became the de facto family bank, the silent, invisible source of stability. And yet, in their narrative, my business remained that website thing, or Clara's project. They had managed the incredible mental gymnastics of accepting my money while simultaneously invalidating its source. The cognitive dissonance reached a breaking point one Sunday evening. We were having dinner at their house, a meal prepared with groceries I had paid for, in a kitchen I had renovated. My father had spent 20 minutes pontificating on how the younger generation didn't understand the value of a solid education and hard-earned credentials. I finally decided to gently challenge his worldview. "Dad," I said carefully, "do you realize that Try Before now employs over 150 people? We're on track to do $12 million in revenue this year." He looked up from his pot roast, a condescending smile playing on his lips. "That's nice, honey, but these internet businesses are a flash in the pan. They come and they go. What happens when it all falls apart? At least your brother will have his engineering degree to fall back on." I pushed my plate away, my appetite completely gone. "I've been running this flash in the pan for 7 years, Dad. It's not falling apart." "Don't get so defensive, dear," my mother interjected, ever the peacekeeper. "We're just concerned for your long-term security." The irony was breathtaking. They were concerned for my future while their present was being bankrolled by my success. I began to see a painful, unavoidable truth. The financial support I provided wasn't a bridge to connection, it was a wall. For them to acknowledge the scale of my success would be to admit that their rigid worldview, the one that said education was the only path to a worthy life, was flawed. It was easier to minimize my achievements, to frame me as a lucky child playing at business, than to question the very foundation of their beliefs. And so we continued the strange, silent dance of dependence and dismissal, an arrangement that was taking a far greater emotional toll on me than I realized, until it all came crashing down on Thanksgiving Day. Thanksgiving had always been the biggest event of the year in the Vance household, a day of elaborate tradition and festive chaos. This year was no exception, though the financial reality behind the scenes had shifted dramatically. I had paid for the 20-pound, free-range heritage turkey, the expensive wines, and all the gourmet ingredients for my mother's signature side dishes. I had even paid for the recent dining room renovation, which now beautifully showcased her antique china and crystal. The house smelled of sage and roasting apples as relatives began to arrive: aunts, uncles, cousins, my siblings, and their partners. I had come early to help, eager for a day of family connection away from the pre-Black Friday frenzy at the office. I was in the kitchen, arranging warm rolls in a cloth-lined basket, when I overheard my father's voice drifting from the living room. He was talking to my Uncle Michael, unaware of how clearly sound traveled through the old heating vents. "Sure, Clara's little company is doing well right now," he was saying, his tone casual, "but she was just lucky with the timing. She wouldn't amount to much if it all went away tomorrow. No education to fall back on, you see." My hands stilled. The casual cruelty of his words, delivered with such matter-of-fact certainty, felt like a physical blow. "Seems like more than luck to me, Arthur," Uncle Michael replied, his voice thoughtful. "Didn't I read she won some big award?" "Anyone can win an award these days," Dad scoffed. "But what has she really accomplished? She has no degree, no real credentials. Just a website." I set the basket down on the counter before I could drop it, my hands trembling. From the dining room, I heard my mother join the conversation. "We do worry about her future, Michael. The internet is just so unpredictable." Then my Aunt Sharon chimed in, "Not like your cousin Megan. A doctor. You must be so proud of her accomplishment." "Oh, we are," my mother agreed warmly. "A doctor in the family. Now that's something real." I moved through the rest of the dinner preparations in a strange, detached haze. When we finally sat down at the magnificent table I had indirectly paid for, I found myself observing my family as if from behind a pane of glass. These were the people who had known me my entire life, yet they couldn't seem to see me at all. Midway through the meal, during a lull in the conversation, I decided to share some news I had been saving. "I have an announcement," I said, setting my fork down. The table quieted. Try Before won the National Retail Innovation Award last week. And I've received an acquisition offer for the company. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. For $22 million. A moment of stunned silence was followed by a flurry of excited questions from my cousins and siblings. $22 million? My brother, Daniel, breathed, his eyes wide. I nodded. "I haven't decided whether I'll accept, but yes, that's the offer." Everyone at the table seemed impressed, even celebratory, except for my parents. My father continued to meticulously cut his turkey, as if I'd announced nothing more significant than a change in the weather. My mother offered a tight, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What would you even do with all that money?" Dad asked finally, his tone implying I was incapable of managing it responsibly. "Well," I began, trying to keep my voice steady, "I've been thinking about launching a new venture, and perhaps—" "Anyone can get lucky like that," he interrupted, setting his knife and fork down with a sharp clink. "But what will you do when it's gone? You're still uneducated." The table fell silent. The air grew thick with tension. "Arthur," my Aunt Sharon murmured, her expression pained. But he was on a roll. "It's the truth. Your cousin Megan, she's built something real with her medical degree. That's a future you can count on. This internet money, it's just smoke and mirrors." I stared at him, the years of carefully managed patience finally snapping. "Smoke and mirrors? Dad, I have been building this company for 7 years. I employ over 150 people. I have fundamentally changed an aspect of the retail industry. We just worry about your stability," my mother pleaded, slipping into her familiar role as peacemaker. "Megan is a doctor. That's a secure profession for life." The comparison, yet again, was the final straw. "Megan is brilliant, and I am incredibly proud of her," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "But why can't you be proud of me too? Why is what I've built never, ever good enough for you?" "Because it's not real," he snapped, his voice rising. "It's just internet nonsense that could disappear tomorrow. Not real." A strange, crystalline clarity settled over me, washing away the hurt and leaving only cold, hard truth. Was the mortgage I paid off for you not real? Are the medical bills I cover for Mom not real? Is Daniel's college tuition not real? Is this dining room we're sitting in not real? My father's face flushed a deep, mottled red. How dare you, he seethed. How dare you throw your money in our faces? We never asked you for handouts. They weren't handouts, Dad. They were support from a daughter who loves her family, even when she has never felt respected by them. We never said you weren't respected, my mother protested weakly. You didn't have to say it, I replied, my gaze locked on my father. You showed it. Every time you called my company lucky. Every time you dismissed it as temporary. Every time you held up someone else's degree as the only true measure of worth. He pushed his chair back from the table, standing so abruptly it nearly toppled over. I will not be spoken to this way in my own home. The home I paid for, I said quietly, the words landing with devastating precision. His face contorted with a fury I had never seen before. Get out, he hissed, his voice low and venomous. Get out of my house, you ungrateful, disrespectful lowlife. No daughter of mine speaks to me that way. Lowlife. The word hung in the shocked silence of the room. My mother gasped, but said nothing. My siblings stared, frozen in disbelief. I stood slowly, my movements deliberate as I placed my napkin on the table. A lowlife, I repeated, my voice steady despite the earthquake inside me. A lowlife who built a $22 million company from nothing and supported her family for years. That's an interesting definition. I looked around the table, at the uncomfortable faces of my extended family, all witnesses to my public execution. No one met my eye. No one spoke a word in my defense. I'll go, I said, turning to leave. But let's be very clear about what just happened. I'm not being kicked out because I was disrespectful. I'm being kicked out because I finally demanded respect. I walked out of the dining room, my footsteps echoing on the new hardwood floors I had paid for. I walked through the foyer and out the front door into the cold November air. It wasn't until I was in my car, my hands shaking so violently I could barely fit the key in the ignition, that I finally allowed the tears to fall. 7 years. 7 years of chasing the approval of people who were fundamentally incapable of giving it. 7 years of proving my worth to a jury that had delivered its verdict long ago. As I drove away from the house I grew up in, I didn't yet know that this devastating breaking point would become my greatest breakthrough. I only knew that something essential had shattered, and that beneath the crushing weight of grief, I had, for the first time in my life, stood up for myself. The first 24 hours were a blur of shock and a strange, hollow numbness. I checked into a hotel, the sterile anonymity of the room a welcome respite from the emotional storm. By morning, my eyes were swollen shut, but my mind was possessed by a chilling clarity. My phone was a cacophony of notifications. Text from Anna. Dad was completely out of line. I'm so sorry, Clara. Are you okay? From Daniel. That was insane. Call me when you can. Even a message from my Aunt Sharon. Your father had no right to speak to you that way. I am so sorry. Conspicuously, there was nothing from my parents. Around noon, I called my best friend, Sabrina, who had moved to Boston years ago but remained my emotional North Star. After I recounted the events of Thanksgiving, she was silent for a moment. He called you a lowlife, she repeated, her voice laced with disbelief. Clara, that's not just disrespect. That's cruelty. Maybe I shouldn't have brought up the money, I whispered, the old habit of self-blame dying hard. Stop that right now, Sabrina said, her tone firm but kind. You stated facts. For years, he has been taking your money with one hand and slapping you with the other. That isn't a complicated family dynamic, Clara. That's exploitation. Her word, exploitation, landed like a punch to the gut. Had I been a willing participant in my own exploitation? But they're my parents, I said, the words sounding weak even to my own ears. I'm supposed to help them. You're supposed to help, yes, she countered gently. You're not supposed to subject yourself to emotional abuse. Let me ask you this. Would you ever allow an employee or a friend to be treated the way your father treats you? The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Of course not. I had built a company culture founded on mutual respect and the celebration of achievement. I had terminated contracts with vendors who were disrespectful to my team. And yet, I had accepted this toxic dynamic from the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. Over the next few days, I reached out. I called my parents' home, leaving voicemails when my calls went unanswered. I sent a carefully worded email, stating that I was hurt but willing to talk when they were ready. Silence. A week passed, then two. Their silence was an answer in itself. Meanwhile, the acquisition offer had a deadline. The buyers needed a decision. That $22 million figure represented more than money. It was the culmination of my life's work, a symbol of the path I had forged for myself. It offered a level of security I had never imagined. I scheduled an emergency session with my therapist, Dr. Hayes. Your parents have shown you, repeatedly, who they are and what they value, she said after I finished my story. The question now is not how to change them, but whether you can accept them as they are, rather than continuing to hope for the parents you wish you had. What about the acquisition? I asked, my voice small. Part of me feels like if I take it and move on, I'm giving up on them. I'm failing. She leaned forward, her gaze direct and compassionate. Clara, you have spent 7 years trying to prove yourself. At what point do you decide that you've proven enough? Not for them, but for you. That night, I made 2 decisions that would change the course of my life. First, I would accept the acquisition offer. Second, I would use this opportunity to create the distance I so desperately needed, not just physical, but emotional. The next morning, I called Beatrice Thorne. I'm accepting the offer, I told her, my voice steady. But I have a condition. I want to relocate the headquarters to Florida. Florida? She asked, surprised. That's a long way from Iowa. I need a new beginning, I said simply. Beatrice, who had become a trusted mentor, was quiet for a moment. This is about your family, isn't it? She asked perceptively. Yes, I admitted. I can't keep trying to win a game that's rigged. It's draining my spirit, and it's starting to affect my ability to lead. You don't need my approval, Clara, she said warmly. But for what it's worth, I think it's the right decision. Both the sale and the move. The pieces began to fall into place. The acquisition was structured with an initial payment and a 3-year earn-out period, during which I would stay on to lead the try before division. The buyers were surprisingly open to the Florida relocation, as they already had a corporate presence in the Tampa Bay area. During this whirlwind transition, my siblings reached out. Anna came to my office, her eyes full of sorrow. I should have said something. Clara, she cried. I'm so sorry. I hugged her tightly. It wasn't your battle to fight. But you've been fighting for all of us, she countered. You carried this family, and they treated you like an ATM that they could also insult. Daniel's call was more complicated. Dad asked me for money for the property taxes, he said awkwardly. I told him he should talk to you. I waited. He said he'd rather not. What's going on? Did you cut them off? The question hung in the air. I hadn't made a conscious decision, but I realized the automatic monthly transfers to their account had stopped after Thanksgiving. I'm stepping back, Daniel, I said carefully. I can't be their financial safety net and their emotional punching bag at the same time. That's fair, he conceded. But they do need the help, Clara. The old, familiar guilt surged. The part of me that was still the good daughter wanted to fix it, to smooth everything over. But Dr. Hayes' voice echoed in my mind. At what point do you decide you've proven enough? I'll think about it, I told him. That night, I did something that felt both terrifying and profoundly liberating. I drafted an email to my parents. I told them that I loved them, but that for the sake of my own well-being, I needed to establish new boundaries. I cannot continue to provide financial support in a relationship that lacks mutual respect, I wrote, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. When you are ready to have a relationship with me that is not conditional on my financial contributions, I will be here, with an open heart. Until then, I need space. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Then I sat in the darkness of my living room and cried, mourning the relationship I had always wanted but would likely never have. 2 days later, the acquisition was finalized. The first payment, $12 million after taxes and paying back investors like Beatrice, was wired to my new investment account. I was, officially, a multimillionaire. And I had never felt more alone. That weekend, I flew to Florida to look for a new home. As the plane ascended, breaking through the thick, gray blanket of an Iowa winter sky, I felt something stir beneath the deep sadness. It was a tiny, fragile flicker, but it was there. It was hope. Perhaps in leaving everything behind, I could finally find what I had been searching for all along. Not their approval, but my own peace. The house wasn't the largest on the block, nor the most ostentatious. But the moment I stepped onto its wraparound deck and saw the uninterrupted expanse of the Gulf of Mexico, I felt a sense of rightness, of coming home to a place I'd never been. It was open, airy, and flooded with light, the complete opposite of the practical, four-square homes of my Iowa upbringing. "It's perfect," I told the realtor, the decision settling in my bones with a certainty that felt new and exhilarating. I closed on the house in January and poured my energy into making it a sanctuary. I hired a local designer named Camila, a vibrant woman with an infectious laugh. "No more beige," I told her. "I want color. I want joy." This home would be a reflection of the woman I was becoming, not the one I had been told I should be. While the house was being transformed, I oversaw the relocation of the business. We found a bright, modern office space in Tampa with sweeping views of the bay. I offered generous relocation packages to my team, and to my surprise, nearly 2/3 of them made the move south, eager for a new adventure. The parent company, true to their word, allowed us to maintain our unique culture and operate with a high degree of autonomy. By March, I was settled. I found a new rhythm, one that was gentle and intentional. My mornings began with coffee on the deck, watching the sky blush pink as dolphins arched through the distant waves. I joined a beachside yoga class where I learned to breathe through difficult poses. I even took up paddle boarding, a humbling exercise in balance and letting go. "You're overthinking it," my instructor, a wonderfully patient woman named Paula, told me as I wobbled. "Your body knows what to do if your mind gets out of the way." Her words resonated far beyond the water. This new life was about more than sunshine and scenery. It was about purpose. Remembering the isolation of my own early days, I launched a mentorship program called the Unconventional Founders Initiative, pairing successful entrepreneurs who lacked traditional degrees with aspiring business owners on a similar path. "Your journey is your credential," I told the first cohort at our kickoff event. "Don't ever let anyone tell you it's not enough." The work was deeply healing, allowing me to build the support system I had always craved for myself. My communication with my family had dwindled to a fragile thread. Anna and I spoke regularly, our bond deepening with the distance. Daniel called occasionally, his conversations usually circling awkwardly back to our parents' ongoing financial struggles. I held firm to my boundary, though the guilt was a constant, low hum in the background. Then, 6 months after my move, my doorbell rang on a quiet Sunday afternoon. I opened it to find my mother standing on my porch, looking small and overwhelmed by the riot of tropical flowers flanking my doorway. "Mom," I said, a wave of shock washing over me. "What are you doing here?" "Your assistant at the office gave me the address," she said, her voice strained. "May I come in?" I led her to the deck overlooking the ocean. The silence between us was heavy with unspoken words. "It's very bright," she said finally, her gaze sweeping over the turquoise and coral accents of my outdoor furniture. "Your father doesn't know I'm here," she began, twisting the wedding band on her finger. "We're struggling, Clara." The property taxes have gone up again, and my new treatments aren't covered. There it was. She hadn't traveled over 1,000 miles for reconciliation. She had come for a withdrawal. I took a slow, deep breath, anchoring myself in the present moment. Mom, I can't go back to the way things were. Dad called me a lowlife and threw me out of your house. Neither of you has ever apologized or even acknowledged how deeply that hurt me. He was upset, she said, her default excuse. You know how he gets. That's not an excuse for his behavior, I said, my voice gentle but firm. Would you advise Anna to stay with a husband who spoke to her that way? She flinched, looking away. It's different with family. It shouldn't be, I countered. Family should be the safest place, not the most painful. I am happy to help you find a financial planner. I can connect Dad with recruiters in my network. But I will not go back to funding a relationship that is based on disrespect. Her expression hardened, the vulnerability of a moment ago replaced by a familiar mask of disapproval. So that's it? You'll let us struggle unless we bow down and kiss your ring. The mischaracterization stung, but I didn't back down. This isn't about bowing down. It's about basic human decency. I'm not asking for praise. I'm asking for respect. Your father was right, she said, standing abruptly. Success has made you cold. No, Mom, I said, a wave of sad clarity washing over me. What's changed is that I've finally started treating myself with the same respect I always gave you. She left without another word. I watched her rental car disappear down the Palm Line Street, and then I sank onto the deck steps, the warm wood a small comfort. The tears that came were not for the confrontation, but for the final, painful confirmation of a truth I had long tried to avoid. The relationship I had with my parents was transactional, and now that I had changed the terms, it was over. That evening, I walked for miles along the shoreline as the sun set in a blaze of glory. The rhythmic crash of the waves felt like the heartbeat of the world, steady and eternal. I finally, fully, accepted that I might never have the parents I longed for, and that continuing to chase their ghosts was preventing me from embracing the life that was waiting for me. Sometimes, the most profound losses clear the way for the most necessary new beginnings. A year to the day after I moved to Florida, I stood on my deck watching another spectacular sunset, a glass of wine in my hand and a quiet sense of contentment settled deep in my bones. The acute, jagged pain of my family rift had softened over time, worn smooth like sea glass, into a quiet wisdom I could hold without being cut by it. The business was flourishing. My earnout targets were being met, but more importantly, my new venture, the Unconventional Founders Initiative, had taken on a life of its own. It was work that fed my soul, a way to transform my own painful experiences into a ladder for others. I was no longer building to prove anything. I was creating from a place of genuine passion and purpose. My life was full. My circle of friends, my chosen family, had become my bedrock. We celebrated each other's triumphs and supported each other through setbacks, our bonds forged in mutual respect and genuine affection. In April, my sister Anna called with surprising news. I'm at the Tampa airport, she said, her voice a little shaky. Surprise. An hour later, she was sitting on my deck, taking in the view. I came to apologize, she said, her eyes welling with tears. In person. For not defending you. For being a coward. I took her hand. You were surviving, Anna. Just like I was. But you were brave enough to leave, she insisted. I've stayed, and I've watched them rewrite history. They tell everyone you abandoned them out of selfishness. They never mention what Dad said. They never mention the years of support. And I can't be silent anymore, Clara. I want to be on the side of the truth. You made the right choice. Her words, you made the right choice, were a key turning the last lock on a door I hadn't even realized was still closed. A final, lingering trace of guilt I'd been carrying dissolved in the warm Florida air. We spent the next 4 days talking more honestly than we ever had in our entire lives. She told me about her own struggles with our parents' rigid expectations. I showed her the life I was building, the business, the mentorship program, the community. On her last night, as we walked along the moonlit beach, she asked, "Do you think you'll ever reconcile with them?" I thought for a long moment, watching the waves foam around my ankles. "I'm open to it," I said truthfully. "But I've stopped needing it. I've accepted that they may never change, and that has been the most freeing realization of all." "You seem lighter," she observed, smiling. "More you." "I am," I agreed. It turns out that living for your own approval is a lot less complicated. A few months later, I received an email from Daniel. Dad had a minor heart attack. He's stable, but it was a scare. The old Clara would have been on the next flight, checkbook in hand. The new Clara felt a pang of compassion, but not of responsibility. I sent flowers to the hospital with a simple, heartfelt note, wishing you a speedy recovery. Clara. I acknowledged the reality without reactivating the toxic dynamic. It was a quiet moment, but it represented a seismic shift in my own healing. To mark the anniversary of my new life, I threw a party at my house. It was a celebration of new beginnings, and my home was filled with the warm, easy laughter of my chosen family. Anna flew down for the occasion. As the sun set, she clinked her glass for a toast. "To my sister, Clara," she said, her voice clear and strong. A year ago, she made one of the hardest choices a person can make. She chose her own well-being over a lifetime of seeking approval. She left behind conditional love to build this beautiful life, where she can finally shine as brightly as she was always meant to. To Clara, and to the courage it takes to begin again. Tears streamed down my face as our friends raised their glasses. In that moment, surrounded by people who saw me and celebrated me for who I was, I felt a sense of belonging more profound than any I had ever known. Later that night, after the last guests had departed, I walked down to the beach alone. The journey from that devastating Thanksgiving to this moment of quiet joy had been the hardest of my life. But sitting there, with the warm sand beneath my feet and the vast, starry sky above, I knew with a certainty that reached my very soul that I wouldn't trade this hard-won peace for anything. Sometimes, you have to lose the life you thought you wanted to find the life that was waiting for you all along. Sometimes, the family you build is the one that truly sets you free. I had walked away not from love, but toward self-love, and toward a life measured not by anyone else's definition of success, but by the quiet, unshakable joy of my own authenticity.